Hello, class. I'm sorry for the delay on this video, and we might be interrupted as uh, I might have to let my partner and her and our kids in the building when they get home. So just to let you know, I might have to hit pause, and it'll be a weird abrupt shift, but hopefully it won't waste any of your time. Welcome back to ethics. I know that this isn't everyone's favorite topic. We want to get into the real hard work of learning the actual tactics and what goes into each of the tactics for raising funds for nonprofit organizations. I really feel strongly that it's important to understand all of these different aspects around nonprofit fundraising so that we serve our missions instead of hurting it, and so that we make sure that we know that what we're doing is the right thing. So when we talk to those donors who, there's always donors who say, go away, and I don't like you. There's always those donors, those potential donors, and sometimes they're just doing it just because they don't know what else to do. So we just want to be able to say, look, we know that what we're doing is the right thing to be doing. So that's why I'm spending so much time on this. And I hope that you're getting something out of us about thinking about nonprofits, even if it's not nonprofit fundraising. This is the basis of nonprofits, is that we're fundraising not from governments, not from taxes, but from people who are donating money, which means we have to make these weird phone calls and do all this weird stuff. So it's good to think about all of nonprofits are based on this premise, the premise that fundraising is an acceptable way to run a nonprofit, as opposed to taxes or just this sort of grassroots everyone exchanging services thing, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. So we'll have one more week of talking about this, and I'll try to be brief. As I said, I wanted to have a guest speaker. They were unable to come, so I had to try to put something together myself. I'll try and say what the guest speaker would have said, but I won't be quite as good as they were. So let's go to a Zoom, or a Prezi rather, and make sense of what I just was talking about. So, first of all, I want to talk about the point of this. We're going to do a 2 to 3 page essay due next Monday. That's a week from today when I'm recording this, and I'll put it up on the video tomorrow or Tuesday morning. I have a discussion board that's up. It's not graded. You don't have to comment on it if you don't like. But please, if you have a question, comment there. I will be checking that 7 days this week just to make sure that any questions that you have about the essay are answered. Topics that you could do are like race, gender, class, donors, real life. And by real life, I mean, well, beneficiaries, right? I mean, we all can talk about trying to avoid whatever and not be pushy and blah, 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 and poor old Olive. But in the end, a lot of people like Olive are suffering because nonprofits don't have the funds that they need to do the work that they need to do. Right? Real life. I want you to make sure that your main argument is about how to minimize harm. Not about not about the harm itself, right? I want you to talk about how to minimize that harm. You'll see in the instructions that that is the instruction, minimizing the harm. Your outline should look like this: 2 to 3 pages, double spaced, 12-point standard font. Times New Roman is probably best. Arial, Courier, any of those. 1-inch margins, clear citations. I don't need APA, don't need Chicago, just clear. It should have a 2 to 3 sentence intro, like one paragraph, with a main argument about how to minimize impact of these ethical dilemmas that we've talked about and learned about. It should have 3 paragraphs supporting that main argument. Each paragraph should be on a slightly different aspect, right? And then it should restate the main argument with recommendations. I think you're all familiar with this essay format. I just want to make it real clear what I'm expecting. It shouldn't be hard. It should be really easy. Just follow this template, follow this format, and do it nice and easy. So, social construction theory is going to point out one of the more loosey-goosey ethical problems that we have with fundraising. And that is that when we're fundraising, we talk about the people who we're fundraising for. And when we talk about them, we set up, we create an image of them that people understand, right? If you understand what a social construction is that we have ideas of people, stereotypes, if you will, and these, sometimes when we're fundraising, we sort of make use of these stereotypes to fundraise. Social construction theory stipulates that That can be a problem for certain people. There are 4 kinds of clients, is what the social constructionists say. These are Schneider and Ingram in 1990. Deserving, or rather advantaged, contenders, dependents, and deviants. If they have a lot of political power, if they can go into Congress and lobby, and people listen to them, and when they go out and protest, people go, oh, there's someone protesting, right? They have a lot of political power. We can think of the middle class. Everyone on the campaign trail says, the middle class, the middle class, the middle class. We can definitely think of veterans. Although that's a tricky one because we say that we really care about veterans, right? And they're certainly deserving, but then they don't really have as much power as we want, as they should, right? Then senior citizens are another one. They don't really have a lot of power. There might be dependents, might be advantaged, but probably more dependents, but they're certainly deserving. The poor children are definitely dependents. They don't have any political power. Native Americans tend to not have very much political power, and the poor, right? So we can see that the dependents are less politically powerful and the advantaged are more politically powerful, but they're both deserving. We know that they deserve help. But then there's a whole group of people that we don't necessarily agree that they deserve help, such as the CEOs, right? CEOs, well, there's a lot of people who attack CEOs. They don't necessarily agree that CEOs need help. Gun owners, people don't necessarily agree. Democrats don't think gun owners need help, right? A lot of Democrats, rather. A lot of Democrats in Colorado do, but Democrats in a lot of the country don't. People experiencing homelessness, right? And some of these are the same group as the poor, and some of these are the same group as the children, but people experiencing homelessness are often blamed for their own conditions, right? Criminals also definitely are blamed for their own conditions, even if their convicts, right, who have done their time, gotten out of jail and trying to set things right. Oftentimes we blame them for what they've done, and so we have that box that says, "Have you ever been a felon?" Right? And then we can't give them a job. And then right-wing militia. We had an example of that in Charlottesville recently, a very sad example of that. They're definitely not deserving. People don't think they're deserving. And they're weak in political power, although they seem to be stronger in political power now than they were in 1990. Right? Nazis used to be an unequivocal, something that was really easy to say, no, the Nazis are the bad guys, even when they might not have been the bad guys, right? So I hope that makes sense to you. I'm not trying to show you my political opinions as much as what I'm trying to do is show you how social construction, how we socially construct different people. How that makes a difference is that we give different groups different things. So a deviant, we give them crimes. If you're taking heroin, we say it's a crime, right? People who are addicted, we say you're doing a criminal activity. Especially in the old days. You are on crack, it's a criminal activity, period, right? Contenders, we give you regulation, or maybe we leave you alone, right? We debate whether to give you regulation or leave you alone. Dependents, like the poor, we give you social benefits, aid, help. Advantaged, we placate you. We try and give you everything we can, right? You get the most out of the system. So let's look at that in real life. Children at the Sun Valley Youth Center, well, they're clearly dependents, children. And they're children from a neighborhood that's been disadvantaged by gentrification, by environmental catastrophes. It's what they would call a neglected zone. So they're definitely dependents. So we'll probably try to give them aid. But aid is expensive, so it depends on how much aid you want to give, right? That's why fundraising helps. You want to talk about them like they're dependents and try and get it. Domestic violence victims, well, they're also dependents. Victim of an earthquake, a dependent, right? A lot of our clients and nonprofits are dependents. What about an addict committing a crime, taking heroin, taking crack, maybe? So they're verging on deviant. Maybe they're right on the line there, right? Right here on the line. Person suffering from addiction. Now look, that's the same. A lot of addiction facilities are now referring to their clients as a person suffering from addiction. So that moves that person from being someone who's committed a crime to someone who's suffering from disease. So they're moving them from deviant to dependent. They're trying to do that with their language. Right? So how you use language matters. And if you say addict as opposed to person suffering from addiction, you might be hurting your client. It might be hurting your beneficiaries. How about an addicted domestic violence victim? Right? Definitely dependent, but also deviant. Right? Things get complicated. What about a wealthy stockbroker who would be a contender? We don't necessarily like wealthy stockbrokers, especially after the crash in 2008. Who was a victim of an earthquake, a dependent, after he built his mansion on the fault line, a deviant, right? So where would he fit? And how you frame that, your client, if that's your primary client, or wealthy stockbrokers who were victims of earthquakes after building on the mansions on fault lines, how you frame that matters for your beneficiary. It also matters for society. What if you frame it in such a way that he gets to be advantaged instead of contender? Right? Would that harm society and maybe spend too much tax money over it? So that's why you need to think about these sorts of things. The language that you're using matters. Another good example of that is the 3 cups of tea example. Right? Greg Mortensen here, he designed this whole nonprofit based around building schools in Afghanistan for girls who didn't have anywhere else to go to school because because girls aren't allowed to go to school under the Taliban. Well, that's all well and good, except that the schools he built were not built in the right locations. Most of the children were in fact migratory. They were on migratory patterns with all kinds of agricultural products like sheep, goats, also farming. So the schools were mostly empty. And he didn't build nearly as many schools as he said he was going to, which is also a problem. So all this money was raised, and nobody knows quite where it went. We do know that he spent $50,000 raising money for his book, to advertise his book, which became a New York Times bestseller, 3 Cups of Tea, which is the book that you can see there. So this goes into the minorities on display argument. There is a scholar who argues that we use people of color and people of different backgrounds, such as Afghan girls, right? Afghani girls, Afghan girls, to try and short circuit your brain and make you not think about the actual merits of what you're doing. Instead, you're going to think, oh, there's a victim and I need to help them. Right? That's a good thing if you're fundraising, but maybe not a good thing for the Afghan girls, or maybe not a good thing for, in this case, this particular banner. Many people thought this was racist on campus, so that didn't help your fundraising efforts at all, right? But also there were people who thought that using the word street smarts was sort of stereotypically black, with the only image of a black man in the entire campaign, was a problem. I'm not going to comment on that, but I will say that we have to think about these things if we want to have a successful fundraising effort. I'm going to pause this for 1 second because I just heard the doorbell ring. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. My family had to get in the door, so I had to leave, and apparently my camera got moved in the process. Oh, man. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. I don't like wasting your time on this stupid technology stuff. But, sometimes it's inevitable. All right. Let's go back to the Prezi that I was showing you. So we had just discussed this billboard and the problems that it caused. And hopefully, you need to take into consideration the fact that, that some people are more sensitive to these issues than other people. I think that they had a legitimate point. And I know that wasn't the intention, right? But the intention in the end doesn't matter. So what matters is the effect. And the effect in this case was that you weren't going to raise any money based on this ad, right? Or you might have done, but maybe not from the people that you wanted to. At any rate, it was a pretty good campaign, but this particular banner didn't work. All right, so moving on from the race conversations that can always be a little, difficult. Let's talk about Robin Hood in reverse. This is a paper that came out in England that I thought was brilliant. And it was basically pointing out that the people who paid for schools tended to be poor because they were the ones who were going to the public schools that needed the most money. So I did a test in Denver using Denver Public Schools and quoting the PTSA where my kids go, which is Dora Moore up on Capitol Hill by the King Supers right there, the Castle School, some people know it as. And what I found was, looking at all the schools in Denver, what I found is that at the bottom here you have the free and reduced lunch rate, what I call the poor rate. That means the people within 200% of poverty, below 200% of poverty, attending the school. And as it goes up, you can see that the amount of money as a percentage goes down dramatically. So 0 is the average school fundraising. You can see no one actually makes anywhere near the average in terms of the PTSA, the nonprofit PTSAs. A lot of people make more, and a lot of people make a lot less. But by and large, the people who make more are the ones with lower poor rates. If you have about half of your student body is above 50%, above 200% of the poverty rate, then you're going to make more money, five to about 8 times the amount of money of the average school. And if you are above 50% in terms of how many of your students are poor, then you're going to make less money, a lot less money for your PTSA. It means that it's practically impossible for schools that don't have rich kids in them to raise funds. And that's a problem, right? So when we're thinking about fundraising, we need to think about who we're asking the money from. Now that's a problem because we're not going to be able to fundraise very well. But it's also a problem because we're taxing the people who already have the most to lose. Poor, we know, give a far higher percentage of their income to charities than do the rich. That's a problem in the first place because we're trying to help the poor when we're asking for money, right? That's a problem right on its face. But on top of that, if it's your clients, you're actually hurting your own clients by asking them to give money that they really can't afford. Or maybe they can afford it, but they shouldn't have to afford it, right? And then the third problem is, and it always comes back to this, you're not going to be able to raise as much money if you're asking poor people for money. You got to ask people who have more money, right? So that's another big picture ethical problem that we have to be aware of when we're writing up our development plans. Last problem is another research project that I worked on, which is about nonprofits and crime. I did this with Lonnie Scheibel, who teaches in the criminology department here at UCD. And he had, what we looked at is whether a nonprofit in a neighborhood would cause more crime, leave crime about the same, or cause less crime. And we looked at this because other studies had found that they were causing crime, that nonprofits were actually causing crime, because they had assumed that they were going to decrease crime. But they were actually causing crime. And the theory is, and we can't really confirm this theory at this time, but the theory is that you bring in clients who often are poor or desperate, and you bring in donors and employees who are not, and it's sort of this mix that can create more crime. We find the same thing at businesses. Businesses tend to have people who are poorer and wealthier in the same place, and when that happens, you get more crime. So almost all businesses increase crime somewhere. But let's look at these maps real quickly. We did find that nonprofits here tend to increase crime, no matter how old they are, and only small nonprofits didn't increase crime, right? So nonprofits that don't have much of an impact generally don't have much of an impact on crime. That makes sense. But here we find that if you look at a place-based nonprofit, that is to say that a nonprofit that focuses on improving their community in which they sit, they don't increase crime, neither by age or by, and you know that because these two solid lines are straddling the 0 line. That means 0 means no more crime or less crime. But then if you look at nonprofits that claim to be trying to reduce crime, look at this. Small nonprofits that claim to reduce crime, and other nonprofits that claim to reduce crime do not. So that is to say, if you want to minimize, right, this is your ethics essay question, if you want to minimize your crime, one way to do it might be to pay attention to reducing crime in the neighborhood, or pay attention to strengthening the neighborhood that you're in. Another way might be to pay attention to the way that you're framing your clients, right, as dependents or deviants or contenders. Another way might be, I'm just giving you some hints here, another way might be to pay attention to how you talk about race when you're communicating around fundraising, or gender, or disability, or veteran status, or any other status. So, just giving you some hints for the types of things you might want to write about for your 2 to 3 page essay that is due at the end of this week. Now, I want to have one statement about that essay. Because you get rewrites, if you turned in an essay that was badly written but that I could give a grade to, I couldn't have a blank page, right? But if you turned in something that I could give a grade to, then you could give a rewrite. So if you had all the sections of the essay, all 5 parts, but they were each just 1 sentence, right? I mean, it's better if you want to finish it. If they're each just 1 sentence, so I get a gist of where you're going, so I could ask you to do a rewrite. You could do that rewrite and get a full grade later. That's if you're running out of time this week and think you might be able to, have time over fall break, for example. Right? Next week, we're looking at marketing. We're going to do a very short 1-page reading, a 10-minute video. There will be a discussion, but it'll be in groups, and it'll be on your language guide. And I have a worksheet to fill that out, so you'll know exactly what you're supposed to write for your language guide. And that's it for this week. Thank you very much for paying attention, and I will see you again next week. Also, thank you for your very thoughtful comments and thought-provoking comments on your survey. I'm going to be making some changes to this course based on it, and we'll be assigning your groups, your small groups, for your language guide discussions and other discussions as we move forward in the development plan. I'll be assigning those small groups based on your comments on that survey. Thanks so much again. I hope that this week was kind of a tough, a big week. This last week was. This week should be easier. I think the ethics essay won't be that much of a problem for any of you. You all clearly can write very well. Have a great day and have a good week. And let me know if you have any questions on Zoom, Monday and Wednesday, 11 to 1, or call me 970-236-6311.